And Sam was like that. If you were his friend, he took very good care of you. So it was early 2001, I get a big box, Gene, in my office. It's a big box, and I go in and open it, and it's full of Green Bay Packers memorabilia, signed footballs, signed team prints, signed jerseys, stuff that he knew my then two young sons would love. And so I called him. I said, Sam, and I appreciate this. This is really kind. Thank you very much. He said, of course, I'm happy to do it. He said, did you get what I sent you? And I said, no, I mean, I got the football, I got this, I got this. He said, well, there's something in there for you. So I unpack everything out of the box. And sure enough, there at the bottom, wedged in there, is an envelope. And I open it up, Gene, and there are 3 checks in there totaling $10,000. And I look at them and I think, well, these are for trucking companies that I do work for, but these are not my cases. So I'm on the phone with Sam. I said, yeah, I got these, but there's a mistake here. One, I don't recognize any of these cases to who these checks refer or mention. And checks aren't payable to me. They're made payable to our trust account. He said, no, I did that on purpose. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take those 3 checks and I want you to run them through your firm trust account. And I want you to give me 75% and I want you to keep 25%.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world this finds you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Welcome to We'll Work for Food, the New Possibilities Hour. Today is February 22nd, 2024, and we're here with a special guest, Mike Bassett, who's out of the Dallas, Texas area. We'll bring you back to Mike in a moment, but as you know, this whole project was founded by Natalie Armstrong Motan in the spring of 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, and then joined forces with Jeff Kachavan, my co-moderator, and then I stepped in at the beginning of 2021 to join them. And so these programs were designed to be provided at no charge. Volunteers speak every week, except for, I guess, Christmas and Thanksgiving, U.S. Thanksgiving. And we just ask that if you're able, if you can make a donation to either a food bank that's suggested by the speaker or food bank of your choice. And then if you would be so kind as to tell us how much you donated. We don't keep track by name or anything, but we just keep a running total. And we're just so pleased to see how that impact, that total grows each week. The impact is amazing. Millions and millions of meals have been served around the world, thanks to the generosity of the audience like you and speakers like you. So in an event, let's see where we are. I know, Jeff, you tell us that this is your favorite part almost every week. So what is our number this week? About how much do we know about in donations?
Thank you, Jean. And yes, it is one of my favorite parts of the program every week. Our audiences have been so generous. The running total of contributions, of which we're aware since the series began, $526,893.02. So generous. Thank you all so much. Jean, back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I mean, isn't that an amazing number? Just to think that someone has an idea and we're all here week after week and making this happen. So thank you all so much for your generosity. And speaking of generosity, today we have a very special guest who's generous with his time and treasure, I suppose, too, to welcome us today and to talk to us. His program, well, first of all, it's Mike Bassett, who's the founder of the Bassett Law Firm in Dallas, Texas. And his program is to talk about what he's calling The Man in the Ditch, a redemption story for today. And this is the title of a book that he wrote, and basically talks about overcoming obstacles and things that aren't so great and making a wonderful life for yourself and those around you. Mike is a civil litigation attorney. He's practiced law for nearly 4 decades. And he is the owner, the host, the host and co-host of the podcast Legal Grounds, which is conversations on life, leadership, and the law. And it was one of my pleasures to be his guest on one of his podcast episodes, and I appreciated that. It's always a pleasure talking to Mike. In his time as an attorney, Mike has embraced the hard path of grace and believes in second chances as much as he believes in honesty to his clients. He is certainly an inspiration, and without further ado, let me turn this over to Mike. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your suggested food bank, Mike, the North Texas Food Bank, and then we will get going.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie, Jean, and Jeff, for allowing me to be on the program today. Our firm first came in contact with the North Texas Food Bank, I think in 2015, when we did a community service event and went down and packed boxes to be distributed to families. And since then, we were hooked. I can tell you that in 2023, the North Texas Food Bank delivered 144 million meals. In 2023, they distributed 33 million pounds of fresh produce. And the great thing about them is for every dollar that you contribute, that goes to serve meals to 3 folks that are experiencing food insecurity. For the lawyers and the law firms that are out there listening, especially those here in the DFW area, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to them. They've got wonderful team building events, and they can really help educate you and your team members about food insecurity in our neighborhood with our neighbors and the people that we know. And I can't say enough good things about them, Jean.
Well, that's great. And, you know, we've had donations made to food banks around the world. And so wherever your local food bank is, thank you so much for helping. The link to the North Texas Food Bank is in the chat. Natalie's got the link in there so you can find it easily. Thank you. Well, Mike, let's talk. You wrote a book. Now, a lot of lawyers write books, you know, so this is not a how to practice law book necessarily. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your book and the name and where, you know, just what brought you to write a book?
You bet. So like Natalie, I know that this podcast sort of had its genesis during COVID. The idea for this book really took root in 2020 and 2021, because like a lot of folks, I had time on my hands and I thought, you know, I've got a story to tell. And so I wonder if I should write a book. And I reached out to a wonderful editor and author by the name of Alexandra Davis, and she and I worked together to write this book. The story is one that takes place in 2000 and 2002. So the story is now 20 years old, but I think the lessons learned, Jean, are timeless. And the title for the book, The Man in the Ditch, really comes from the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is the thesis of our firm's mission statement. And my thought has always been that once we can identify with the man in the ditch, I think we can become better lawyers and better versions of ourselves. And if you wouldn't mind, I would like just to tell a brief story about how this thing all unfolded and where I am today with it, if that's okay with you and your listeners.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
You bet. So this is going to take about 5 or 7 minutes. So if you have a cup of coffee, just sit back and I will tell you a short story. I'm going to condense the story in the book down to about 5 to 7 minutes. So I graduated law school in 1987. So all of this starts in 1994. I am a 7-year lawyer. And for anybody here on the program who has done insurance defense or civil defense, I get a call from an insurance company and they say, listen, we want you to handle a new claim for us. And it's with a trucking company that I'd never worked for. And the director of claims there is a guy that we're going to call Sam. And Sam was the person that was my contact at the trucking company. And it was a small case. It was not a big case. But as is often the case on the defense side of the bar, if you do a small case well, then more cases follow. And that is what happened with Sam. He liked the work that we did, and I liked working with Sam. You know, now this is all pre-COVID, and I know it's weird to talk about, you know, we used to do everything in person. And Sam was one of those clients who wanted to do things in person and be very hands-on. So every time there was a mediation, he would show up. Every time there was a key deposition, he would show up, which meant that he would generally come in town the night before. And so I got to eat a lot of meals with Sam, and I got to know him. I was introduced to his family. Sam was introduced to my family. Sam came out to the house that we were living to in Waxahachie, south of Dallas. He broke bread around my kitchen table, and as a fellow Catholic, even went to mass with my family. And so Sam directed claims for a number of trucking companies under a holding company umbrella, and we started to get hired more and more by Sam. You know, he was one of those clients that we defense lawyers really love. He knew his business, he knew trucking, and he knew how to defend cases. He was very easy to talk to. He would let you spend money on cases if they needed to be defended. And best of all, from a civil defense lawyer's perspective, he paid his bills timely. We got to the point where we were trying cases all over North Texas for Sam. So in 1996, another lawyer and I broke off from the firm we were at, and we went and opened our own firm. And Sam's business followed us. You know, it was sort of like hanging out my own shingle and getting a whole roof in return. And Sam was one of those guys that was very well known in the transportation industry. Anybody here who is in the mediation and the arbitration industry, you know that there are people that are well known in the national organizations that everybody knows. And Sam was one of those people, Gene. Either you knew Sam or you knew of Sam. And he had never met a stranger. He was one of those folks that would walk in a room and just automatically become everybody's best friend. And because he was the person that hired lawyers, as you can imagine, people gravitated towards Sam like moths to a flame. And if Sam started making introductions for you, he would put you on the right path. He was a kingmaker, if nothing else. And he introduced me to a lot of folks. And we would be at a conference and he would say, hey, so-and-so, this is Mike, my lawyer down in Texas. If you ever need anything down in Texas, he's the person to call. And thankfully, a lot of those people did, Gene, and a lot of those people hired us. And Sam was like that. If you were his friend, he took very good care of you. So it was early 2001, I get a big box, Gene, in my office. It's a big box, and I go in and open it, and it's full of Green Bay Packers memorabilia, signed footballs, signed team prints, signed jerseys, stuff that he knew my then two young sons would love. And so I called him. I said, Sam, and I appreciate this. This is really kind. Thank you very much. He said, of course, I'm happy to do it. He said, did you get what I sent you? And I said, no, I mean, I got the football, I got this, I got this. He said, well, there's something in there for you. So I unpack everything out of the box. And sure enough, there at the bottom, wedged in there, is an envelope. And I open it up, Gene, and there are 3 checks in there, totaling $10,000. And I look at them and I think, well, these are for trucking companies that I do work for, but these are not my cases. So I'm on the phone with Sam. I said, yeah, I got these, but there's a mistake here. One, I don't recognize any of these cases to who these checks refer or mention. And checks aren't payable to me. They're made payable to our trust account. He said, no, I did that on purpose. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take those 3 checks and I want you to run them through your firm trust account. And I want you to give me 75% and I want you to keep 25%, and I want you to keep 25%. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that, Sam. And he said, well, here's the deal. The checks are made payable to you, not your law firm. I want you to take the checks and I want you to cash them and I want you to give me the money. It's about $10,000. And I said, Sam, I'm not going to do that either. I'm just not going to do that. Now, remember, I knew Sam well enough that I thought, my goodness, maybe he's got something going on in his personal life and he needs money. Maybe somebody's sick. Maybe he has some sort of debt. So I offer as a friend, I said, Sam, I'll pay you. I mean, I'll loan you $10,000 if that's what you need. He goes, no, I want you to give me that money. And I said, Sam, it's just not going to happen. And then, Gene, his tone changed. He went from being the easygoing guy that could open doors for you, that was always the life of the party, and he became, let's just put, pretty icy. And he said, Mike, here's what you're going to do. And I'll give you the G-rated version. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to take those checks and you're going to cash them and you're going to give me the money. And if you do not, I will tell everybody in the trucking industry that you have lost it. I will pull all of the business I have from your firm, and I will encourage everybody I know who has sent you business to do the same. Now, at this point, that was about, as I remember, Gene, about $500,000 a year in business. So not an insignificant sum. So at that point, I'm at a crossroads. What do I do? Do I do the right thing? Call Sam's boss and say, hey, listen, your director of claims is embezzling money and I've got $10,000 of it here. I'm going to send it back to you. Or do I take the checks, cash them, give him the money, keep my mouth shut, and keep getting Sam's business? Well, I can tell you, Gene, in those moments, you learn sometimes that panic can make morals pretty malleable. So I cashed the checks and I gave him the money. And I thought that things would blow over because, you see, I continued to get work for Sam, Gene, and people were continued to be referred to me by Sam, and everything rocked along. And then in early 2002, the house of cards came crumbling down. In the course of a routine audit, Sam's employer found out that he had been embezzling money to the tune of about $1 million. And his scheme was pretty simple, Gene. He would take checks and he would send them to lawyers that he was working with across the country not on cases they were working on. And many of those lawyers, Gene, took him up on his advice. And they would take those checks and they would run them through their firm trust account, and they would keep part of the money and give Sam part of the money. And so the house of cards came crumbling down. That was January the 16th, 2002. So I drove home that day to explain to my wife that I had ruined our lives. And that was over 22 years ago. And some conversations, Gene, are still too raw, and I will not share that one with you. But I can share with you this. My wife, who was the CFO of our law firm, who is not a lawyer, had the wherewithal to say, you need to hire a lawyer. So I called a dear friend of mine, Martin Lenore, a criminal defense lawyer here in Dallas, and I hired him. Martin sent me over to a psychiatrist that he knew that day who would end up treating me for about 2 years for depression and anxiety. And then Martin said, hey, Mike, you know, the federal charges are going to be one thing, but the state bar, you're going to get grieved on this thing. You need to hire another lawyer. So he referred me to Jim Burnham, and my wife and I met with Jim Burnham, and I hired him for the grievance. So in the course of 2 days, Gene, from January 16th to January 18th of 2022, I had walked away from the firm that I had helped found. I had hired 2 very expensive and very capable criminal defense lawyers, and I had been prescribed medication for anxiety and depression. It was not the start to 2002 that I had envisioned. Fast forward, in late 2002, I plead guilty to 1 count in federal court. As part of that sentence, I'm sent to a halfway house for 90 days, beginning in June of 2023, just south of Dallas.
Mike,
state,
if I can interrupt you for 1 second.
please.
You've gone back and forth between, I thought it was 2002 and 2022.
No, excuse me, 2003, 2003. I apologize.
Just want to be clear on
Years. No. So January 2003 is when I report to the halfway house. And so I was there for 90 days. And in late 2002, the State Bar Grievance Committee meets. I meet with them, and they ultimately end up issuing a public reprimand, which means, thankfully, I can keep my license. So I go to this halfway house in 2003 for 90 days. And it was, to say it was difficult is an understatement. I'm sure people have had much worse, but I could leave every morning at 6 o'clock, and I had to be back every night by 6 p.m. Every time I left the office, I had to call them. Every time I went somewhere, I had to call them. Every time I wanted to get on an airplane, I had to get written permission from a probation officer. I could leave the halfway house on Sunday mornings to go to mass with my wife and my kids, but I had to be right back. So in 2002 is when we started the firm, out of the ashes of what I had done with my old firm. And we started the firm around the conference table of a dear friend of mine. And in fact, February the 4th, 2002 is when our firm started. We just celebrated 22 years. And when we started, it was me, another lawyer, and a paralegal. And we had 162 cases, all of my clients except two, Gene, left me. And I can understand I was radioactive. So we started back then, 2 lawyers, 162 files. I can tell you today, as of this morning, we have 15 lawyers, and I think that we opened file number 4,382 earlier this week. And I'm very thankful for all that, but really, Gene, what I'm most thankful for is my time in the ditch and really the lessons it taught me about being a better lawyer and a better person. So that's the backstory, Gene.
Wow. Wow. What a life experience.
That's
Thank you.
one way to put it.
You're not kidding. Thank you for your candor. So out of this experience, obviously, like out of the ashes, like the phoenix, rising here, what lessons would you be able to tell us about that you've learned?
Yeah, there are so many of them, but I think I'm gonna focus really on 3 of them. And the first one I'm going to focus on is community. And that is the realization that all of us, I think, ultimately come to, that we are not in this alone. Oftentimes, as lawyers, especially as a trial lawyer that I am, I will think I'm working on a big case and I'm the lead lawyer and everything rests on my shoulders. And that may play into sort of this romanticized, rugged individualism that I think our country embraces. But I will tell you that that is a very, very dangerous way to think. Because in life, when you are in these tough moments, if you feel that you are alone and you have nobody to turn to, Gene, you're going to make really, really poor decisions. And I'm exhibit A. There were 5 or 6 people, Gene, I could have called the minute that I opened those checks, but I didn't, because I felt I had nowhere to turn. And if you don't think I'm being honest about it and truthful about it, if you've ever watched a nature documentary, Nat Geo has these wonderful documentaries they do, and a lot of them are shot at night, and you can see the animals roaming around. And watch when predators go to get an animal. The first thing they do is separate the victim from the herd and to get that person alone. And that's where I found myself, by my own choosing, to be sure, but I didn't turn to those people around me. And what I tell lawyers all the time is, you hopefully will never be confronted with a situation as brazenly illegal as mine was. I don't know, maybe you'll get one that's even more brazenly illegal. But the fact is, when you are in the trenches and you are doing your practice and you're fighting every day, if you come across something that makes you pause, turn to the people in your community, lean into those people, go talk to somebody, because we cannot do this alone, Gene. We cannot. So that is my first one, when I really do believe in community. The second one is this concept of decency. And that's something that has really become important to me. And I think decency may be the bright side or the light side of bullying. And that's something that I talk about often. We in the legal community, especially those of us who are litigators, are in an adversarial role. I know a lot of folks on this program are mediators and they're arbitrators, and they are trying to bring people together, and they're bridge builders, and I salute you for it. Without you guys, the legal system would just grind to a halt. But for those of us who are on opposite sides of the V, it is an adversarial process. And I think, Gene, if we are not careful, we can relegate people opposite us just to the ash heap because of the way that they treat us or the way that we think we should be treated. And that does nobody any good. Some of the best lawyers that I know, and by best, I mean lawyers with the most impact, to whom I would refer people if they needed a lawyer, are some of the most decent, pleasant people you could ever meet. You know, Seneca, the philosopher, talks about that all cruelty, I think the quote is, all cruelty springs from fear. And my experience has been, when I'm dealing with a lawyer that is cruel or is mean or a bully, generally I'm dealing with somebody that on some level is afraid. And I think one of the things we can do as lawyers is to be decent to one another. Because every one of us at some point, Gene, is going to either end up in the ditch or know somebody that is in the ditch. And it is not in those moments that anybody needs to be lectured or have a finger wagged at them and told, how could you do this? Trust me, those people know what a mistake they've made. And the third thing I really have come to believe in, and I think is so important, is the concept of forgiveness. Not only forgiveness for the people that we come up against, but also forgiveness for ourselves. Because we make these mistakes and we tend to believe that they define us, and they don't. One of the things that I learned is that even with a public flameout like I had, there's still chance for people to forgive you. And I don't think you realize how important that is, Gene, until you're on the receiving end of it. I can't tell you the number of people who were mean to me, cruel to me, said bad things about me, talked trash about me. I can't tell you. Frankly, one, I've forgotten, and two, the list would be too long. But when you ask me, Mike, tell me the people that were kind to you and forgave you, I can rattle off those names and see those faces, Gene, like they were yesterday. And so I encourage lawyers to be lawyers that are forgiving. Because if you're not, all you're doing is drinking poison, thinking you're going to hurt somebody else, and you're just hurting yourself. So, Gene, really, those are the three big takeaways of what I experienced with my time in the ditch and finding myself where I am today.
This is all just wow. Loyalty is something that you've mentioned in the past and as being very important. You know, to you, to us, just to the law, life in the law, just to human beings in general. What are your thoughts in that regard as, you know, given this experience?
Sure. You know, Stephen Covey has this concept called your emotional bank account, and that sometimes we overdraw our emotional bank account. And I know I do regularly with people in my life world. But there are going to come times when we are dealing with people, whether they are law partners, whether they're opposing counsel, whether they are judges, and they are going to make mistakes and they're going to overdraw their bank account with us. To me, where loyalty comes in is saying, listen, I know you, I trust you, you made a mistake, not you're a bad person, not you are not somebody that I want to associate with, but saying, listen, that was a real mistake you made. I'm still your friend, but don't do that again. Because far too often, when people make mistakes, the first reaction is to distance yourselves from them. Now, are there times you need to? Yes, absolutely. But think about the people you know that practice law, that you have known over the years in your career that have made really dumb mistakes. Maybe they've been private mistakes, Gene, or maybe like mine, they were very public. Just to cut and run on those people certainly is something you can do, but I think we're called to better than that. I think we're called to reach out to those people and say, you know, that was really not the smartest thing to do, and I hope it all works out for you, but I'm still here for you if you need somebody. Because until you have been the person that everybody's walked away from, I don't think, Gene, you recognize the value of loyalty. Because we certainly want loyalty from our clients. We certainly want that. I hear lawyers all the time nowadays say, well, you know, these clients just aren't loyal anymore. They'll just drop, you know, and go to another lawyer for a cheaper rate. Well, my thought is this: build relationships that are not based on just money, but on loyalty and friendship. And those, Gene, are the bonds that bind, at least been in my experience.
And yet here you thought you had a friendship and a loyalty with Sam, and he used you. He cultivated you, you know, almost.
He groomed me, let's just say it. Yeah,
Okay.
and you know, I think that Sam was very, very smart in a lot of ways and knew the lawyers with whom he could do this, because it wasn't just me. There were other lawyers. And just so you know, there were other lawyers I learned later that were not $10,000 checks. They were $200,000 checks that they were running through their firm trust account. And so if you have a lawyer doing that, knowing full well that that is wrong, I think that says something about Sam's gravitational pull. Like I said, moths to a flame. And yes, now that's on me. I don't lay any of this at Sam's feet. I'm not going to do that. That's not my place. I take full responsibility for my actions. But yes, there are some people that can ingratiate their ways into your life that are not the best. Now, those people, Gene, I do think you need to cut and run from, because there's nothing but heartache on the other side of that. And I'm a living testament to it.
Clearly, how has this experience changed your life?
You know, I don't know how it's changed. Well, I do know how it's changed my life, but let me answer it this way. When I was a 40-year lawyer, or excuse me, a 40-year-old lawyer 20 years ago, I would get called to handle cases and be the one that goes down and try the case. You know, be the person that goes down into the courtroom and tries the case. And while that still happens, the older I get, more and more of my phone calls, Gene, are, hey, Mike, we've got this situation. We've got this lawyer on the other side. If you've got a relationship with them, could you just go over and meet them and go to dinner and talk about what's going on and see if there's some way we can't get a path going forward? A lot of my speaking engagements used to be about trial techniques and how to cross-examine experts. Now I speak on things like bullying and how to deal with difficult lawyers, or giving the talk that I'm giving today about my time in the ditch. So hopefully my time in the ditch has made me a lot wiser and maybe realize that everybody's got stuff to offer, and trying to find the best in people, Gene. I would hope that that's what, if somebody met me today that knew me 22 years ago, I hope that's one of the differences that they would see.
And really, some of that may just be chalked up to maturing and age and experience and the normal progression of one's life and one's career, becoming the trusted advisor, if you will, as opposed to the the one who's going into court and fighting the battle there. You're able to finesse enough to help resolve things behind the scenes.
I think so. Lord knows that I am always up for more maturation and being more mature. But I think, yes, as time goes on, but I think I'm very fortunate because my time in the ditch, I think, really brought to the front of mind these things that I think we need to focus on. Because had this not happened to me and I had not been stripped down and thrown at the bottom of the ditch, Gene, I don't think there would have been a sea change in me the way there was. I just don't think it would have happened. So for that, this is what I tell people. Well, someone will say, when you look back on that, what do you think of that experience? And I tell them this: it was the most powerful, life-giving thing I've ever been through, and I would never wish it on my worst enemy.
But it transformed you for the better, would you
It
say?
did. It could have been for the worst, though. Thank God I was surrounded by people that supported me, because we know people in our lives that get knocked down and in the ditch, and they never pull out of the dive. They spiral into depression. They may take their own lives. They just never are able to get out of it. And thankfully, I was surrounded by a group of people really that pulled me up and would not let me stay in the ditch.
That's great. For many reasons, obviously. One of the comments here in the chat, just so you know, is that it takes character to own it. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start again. Good for you. I think that says a lot. I was in a mediation recently, and it involved a car accident. And you talk about the power of forgiveness. The two people involved, actually, that wasn't the first time this happened either. They actually got a chance to talk and not just be what amount of money is going to change hands, from the insurance payment. And the person who'd lost a loved one actually, forgave the person who had been in the accident and whose accident then resulted in the death of their loved one. And it was such a powerful thing to see, the apologies and the forgiveness.
And I think that's very important. And you know, I believe all of us are given stories that we need to tell. So this happens to me all in 2002, 2003. This is when the worst of it goes on. And one of my most dear friends, Jim Stanton, was a lawyer that kind of took me in under his wing and helped me get back on my feet. He would told me for years, Gene, you should write a book. You should write a book. You need to write a book. And I thought, there is no way, A, that I'm going to relive that, and B, nobody cares. Nobody cares about my stupidity and my story. And then when I wrote the book and the feedback I have gotten reinforced or really helped me understand that, yes, all of us have a story and everybody can benefit from our story. And when I give this talk, I will give people my cell phone number and I will put it in the chat here before we go. And I tell people, if you end up at where you're in a problem and something doesn't seem right, call me because we can talk. And if you don't talk to me, talk to somebody else. But just the ability to have people to say, I'm here to help you, can make all the difference. I mean, that can be the binary decision, Gene, between somebody pulling out of it and somebody never pulling out of it. And I think all of us have stories, and I think the world is better. I think the world is better when we share our stories.
Is that what the inspiration was for your podcast?
It's funny. The inspiration for the podcast was sort of like I was reading up on Natalie's intro for the website for the Work for Food, and it came during COVID when I had all this time on my hands. And I usually don't watch TV, but I'm at home and I would watch TV and then I would get on the internet and I would look at the news and I thought, there's got to be good things going on in the world. Why are we spending time talking about these things? Let's talk about things of interest and what are people doing that are making the world better. And really the genesis of it was, I'm from a family of 5. We were all adopted. And my older brother, Big Mike, that's what happens when you adopt 5 kids. Sometimes you get 2 with the same name. My older brother, Big Mike, when he was in college, used to take me out for coffee all the time when I was in grade school. And I remember sitting at diners just talking over coffee. And as a lawyer, I love meeting people for coffee and talking with them. So what I envisioned, Gene, was just a virtual cup of coffee, getting to know people that I find interesting, because I find people very, very interesting. And just like you and I did, to sit and talk, because I always come away from those things much smarter than I went in. And based on the feedback from the podcast, I think a lot of people really dig sort of the vibe we're putting out there.
I remember when you first started your podcast, somehow I became aware of it, probably through LinkedIn or something, probably it was LinkedIn, and looking at it and thinking, wow, just nice to sit around, have a cup of coffee. And then, several years later was when your office reached out to me. And it was certainly an honor, especially as I looked at your guest list of people you've had on. And those are recorded, right? So people listen to those. Yes.
Yeah, it's on all of the platforms, as the cool kids say. And I think we just put up episode number 163. And
Wow.
that's been really, really fun and just a great outlet to get to know people.
Do you have any stories of doing that? Any favorite guests or when you've been in practice about mediation or arbitration? You do have a lot of arbitrators and mediators here in this audience.
It's funny. I am putting on training for our lawyers on Monday called Confessions, because I do about 30% of my practice is mediation. I'm certainly not in the realm and of the caliber of everybody on this Zoom call, but about 30% of my practice is mediation. And it's really lawyers who hire me to do it. I don't get a lot of court appointments, and most of it's catastrophic injury type of stuff, although there's some business, divorce, and things like that. And after doing this, and after having been a participant in mediations in 37 years, I put together a PowerPoint and a presentation called Confessions of a Mediator. I think it's called 6 Things to Do to Get Your Best Settlement. And it's a talk that I've given again and again. And for everybody on this call, it's not going to be anything new, but it's things like this. Get your ducks in a row before mediation. Don't show up scrambling. If you're a plaintiff and there are people that need lien reductions or there are stakeholders, they need to be notified very early on. If you're on the defense side, make sure that everybody with settlement authority attends. I'm a huge believer in having excess layers of insurance attend mediations, even if they don't think they're layers in play. Because guess what? It's going to happen, and it's probably going to happen about 4:30 in the afternoon. And people don't go from 0 to 100 very well. The next thing I tell people all the time is when you are mediating, be a sponge. It is free discovery. I ask my mediators all sorts of questions. And what's the worst thing, Gene, as a mediator, you're going to tell me? I don't know, or I can't tell you. That's fine. I didn't know going into the mediation, and who knows what I would have learned. The next thing is the power of kindness. As you talked about, Gene, the case that settled with the people that were literally able to hug. I represent a lot of businesses where people are injured or killed, and they're really tragic events. And in the right situation with the right client, when it is heartfelt, I am all about going in and simply saying, we made a mistake. We should never have done this. You lost your husband. I am so sorry. Just that can take out all of the anger. And then, at least to me, is when the real process starts. Because when people are angry and they're still in emotion, at least my experience has been people don't think very clearly. The next one is, I tell people, if you've got a big mediation coming up and you're representing, as a defendant, I'm representing somebody that I think makes a great witness, I bring them so the mediator can talk to them. Because I can say to you all day, Gene, people are going to love my truck driver. Gene, this is the nicest guy in the world. People are going to love him. And you go in the other room and you say to the plaintiff's attorney, you know, I think the jury's really going to like the truck driver. And the plaintiff's attorney is going to say, well, who told you that? And you say, the defense lawyer. And the plaintiff's lawyer says, of course he did. What else would he say? So if I've got a great truck driver, I'm bringing them to mediation via Zoom and letting you talk to them. So you can go in, Gene, and be my advocate and say, you know, I talked to that truck driver and she's going to make a great witness. I think that's something you need to think about. If I've got an expert that I think blows a case open, absolutely, I'm going to have them call in and talk to the mediator. So the mediator can ask the hard questions, and then the mediator can go in the other room and say, you know, I talked to Bassett's toxicologist, and I think she makes some really good points that you all are going to have to think about. So I'm all about arming the mediator with information to help me get my case settled. And then the last thing I really think is important is that you have got to prime the mediator with your narrative. I don't know about the folks on this call, but I always encourage people to give me mediation position statements. I probably get them 30% of the time, maybe. The other time people just show up and they've sent me my form that says this is what the case is about. But if you take the time to draft a well-written work of advocacy mediation position statement, I think it can make all the difference in the world, Gene, especially if I'm mediating a case and you are the plaintiff's lawyer and you send me a fantastic mediation position statement and the defense lawyer sends me nothing. I'm human. I'm going to go into that mediation thinking that you've got the stronger case. So I really, really encourage lawyers to do that. But I'm sure everybody on this call knows all of those things and even more. But those are some of the tips I give people.
Sounds good. Let me ask you this, going back to your time after the ditch, as you were crawling out of the ditch, coming out of it, did you experience mediation with the state bar or with the government or anybody?
We mediated the partnership breakup with my old firm. And I still remember where it was. I remember what floor it was. I remember the conference room, and I remember the view. And I remember that at that point, Gina, I was so broken and beaten down. I just wanted out. And it was very perfunctory just to make things happen and get rid of it. But as far as the state bar and anything else, no, there was no mediation or anything like that. There were negotiations, but of course I was not, at least with the federal government, but I was not a part of those. And to the extent that there were any communications regarding the grievance committee and my lawyers, I was not privy to those.
Yeah. For let's just go back to the name of your book. I'm not
Sure.
sure that we really actually said that in the beginning. The Man in the Ditch, a redemption story for today, right?
Yes, yes.
name?
It's on Amazon, and I think it's on a bunch of other platforms. It's 122 pages. I say you can read it for those of you who take a lot of airplane flights. Unless it's a short haul between San Antonio and Dallas, you can read it on one leg of an airplane. And I think it's important for those of us in the law to know some of those lessons, because what I share with people is nothing new. There's nothing groundbreaking in there, Gene. There's not. But I'm able to deliver it based upon the experience I had. And maybe, just maybe, it resonates with somebody and it makes them a little bit better version of themselves.
And that's a wonderful gift
Yes.
for you to give to everybody who reads your book and listens to your story.
I'm looking at a thing here from Roger Moss, and it just popped up, and let me see if I can do this and not kill the internet. Okay, here we go. Okay, from Roger Moss. Why am I still litigating? Why not just mediate? Well, I got to tell you, Roger, there's part of me that still loves the challenge of being in the courtroom and using those muscles. And I've done it long enough and I've made so many mistakes. I think I've learned a thing or two. So I still think I'm useful in that regard. But I will tell you, when I have a day or a week that has 3 mediations, there's a part of me that has a very big smile internally, because I know I'm going to be able to help people. And at the end, either the case settles or it doesn't, and there's not another deadline for me to be worried about, Roger. So yeah, that's a question. I think that's a question my wife probably asks me more than anybody.
Good question.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? Would you like to raise your hand or just speak up?
May I, Jean? And
Yes.
Breen Greco. You know, I use this hand because, Mike, I think it kind of comes into your story about this is a result of a very painful dog bite, and I
Ooh.
have to have outpatient surgery tomorrow. And my very supportive friends, of course, it's very nice, but everyone's saying, well, how did, and are you going to sue? And did you press? And all of that really is irrelevant. Just give me the support for this. Mike, I want to maybe start and go backwards a little bit, because you were asked a very good question about, was there mediation for your process and so on? And I wrote down the role of the state bar, because when I listened to you, Mike, first of all, thank you for sharing. It's very painful still for, I'm trying to absorb it for you, but I wrote down the phrase teachable moment. And that's what you're doing. You're turning this in to teachable moments for so many people. And you probably, a lot of you probably do the same thing I do at this stage of our careers. We interact with law students, young lawyers, and so on. And I'm thinking, talking about teachable moments, the role of the state bars, I encourage law students to join all the bar associations, because many of them are free, both your local and your state. But there's a role here for curriculum also in law schools, because law schools should prepare us not just for the substantive issues of the law, but for the very moments that you encountered as a seasoned lawyer, you know, as a good person with a lot of friends and colleagues, and yet this kind of thing happens. So I'm hoping that both the bar associations and law schools see something like this as being very important, very prime, that they should be addressing to really help guide these young people to know you do have somebody to fall back on, or some entity to contact if something like this should occur.
And thank you. Yes. And I will tell you, I've given this talk to various state bar events, and I give it every year to the UNT Law School here in Dallas, to St. Mary's, my alma mater down in San Antonio. And I've given it to several other law schools, but it's something so important because while we can be taught professional responsibility in school, and we learn don't steal clients' monies and don't sleep with clients and don't do drugs in court, those are all good rules. But what happens when this happens? Because Anne, I have heard stories from lawyers after I tell my story that my jaw hits the floor. Some of the things that people are confronted with that are just like mine. And if you don't think you have anywhere to turn to, that's when you make some of the worst decisions ever. So I agree with you. And I'm doing my best to spread the word to any group that will let me tell the story, because it will happen. It won't look like mine, but it'll happen to almost everybody out there. I am going to put my cell phone number in the chat, and I do mean this in all sincerity. If you run into somebody or you know somebody who is going through this, please have them reach out to me. If I had done that, this all could have been avoided. And sometimes it's embarrassment that they don't know what to do. And nothing warms my heart more than when I get the random text from somebody that says, I had to get my CLE hours and I was watching a CLE that you gave in 2019 or 2020, and I saw your speech and I'm going through this situation. Can we meet for coffee? I think that's part of what I'm called to do, or was fortunate enough to experience what I experienced. So please feel free to reach out to me.
And clients can put so much pressure on their lawyers in many different ways, so many ways when you're there, and it can be, how to resist or not, or what to do. The gift of your cell phone number hopefully will help a lot of people. I'm sure it already has.
Well, it's not going to be, hey, like mine, let's commit wire fraud together. Here's how it will sound. Hey, Jeff, listen, on that one case we've got, we love working with you, and, you're our guy. And we send you all of our business in the northern part of the state. And we really like that relationship, and we think it's important. And Jeff, we need lawyers that really kind of are part of the team. And we need you to do this for the team, because I think it'll be good for you and good for us. It'll be good for your family. I mean, it can be subtle. It can be very, very subtle. I have had, as a mediator, I was mediating a case one time for a very, very large company that everybody on this call would know by name. And I was mediating a case, and the person there essentially said, I don't like the way that mediation is going. I don't like what you're coming in here and telling me about the problems with your case. We have a ton of mediations and we hire mediators all over, and we would love for you to do 5 mediations a month for us. But unless you're going to do this for me, we're not going to use you anymore. And I just stopped the mediation and said, don't threaten me. You can leave. I'll give you your money back. Because that's what it was. It was a threat. It was a very, very veiled threat. Do what I want and work with me on this, or we're not going to give you what we want. And maybe my antenna are much more in tuned now, but that's what it looks and sounds like, Gene. And people need to be aware of it.
Well, and Roger, I'll get to you in a minute here, but just the fact of you receiving that box with those gifts, my antennas went up immediately, not knowing what the rest, that there would be money at the bottom of the box for you.
It makes for a great John Grisham book. It really would.
It does. It does. Roger, you had a question? And then Jeff, yeah.
Let me just add, the efforts to corrupt mediators take many, many forms. For example, and the people who serve as both mediators and arbitrators permit this, where somebody will hire neutral X as an arbitrator on a big case, and then all of a sudden start feeding them mediations. So that, let's say, an arbitration hearing, typically an arbitration hearing might not take place for a year or more. And during that interim year, boom, every couple of months, up comes another paycheck from that one of the parties to the arbitration as a mediator. Personally, and some arbitrators will take those engagements and not even disclose that those mediation engagements are taking place. Remarkable, but these do happen all the time. And Mike, I've had it happen too, where lawyers have come to me in mediations and said, we've been looking forward to working with you and we've heard about you, but we're just not getting the kind of result we want here in this mediation. We have a lot of, we use a lot of mediators and we're just not getting the result we want here. And I say, well, if you brought a stronger case, you might get a better result. It's really your responsibility, not mine, to present a strong case or strong defense here. There are a lot of ways that this goes on. You're absolutely right.
I never thought of that. Wow.
Yeah, I once received a gift card in the mail from a lawyer who'd been in a mediation afterwards, and I was so taken by surprise, but I mailed it back to him. It was just a simple gift card for a restaurant, but I do not want to go down that road. And thanked him, but no thank you. Yeah.
Smart.
Okay, so let's see. What else do we have here? We have a couple more comments, and then we will be.
And I'm very mindful of your time. I do, I know lawyers are busy people and most of us live by 6-minute increments, Gene. So I do not want to make anybody go over the hour more.
And we still have a 0.1 left. We could round it up,
Fair enough.
Yeah, some amazing comments here. David Mayer a gentleman here says, this is frightening and enlightening at the same time. Your statement that in some circumstances, morals can become malleable for all of us. I will remember the presentation for the remainder of my life.
You're too kind, David. I don't know if it's that good, but I appreciate you staying awake for the hour. That's more than a lot of audience members have done during my speech.
Well, and I think we'll all remember it and remember the lessons and how easily, in retrospect, people would think, well, how could that happen? But at the time, you really have to catch yourself and think, is this right? Is this the person I am? What will my life look like if I do this or I don't do this?
Yes.
Whatever it might be. Yeah. So I can't thank you enough for being here with us today. All the best to you. I'm so glad you have your life in the law back again, and welcome back anytime. All the best to you. And thank you everybody for being here. We appreciate any donation you can make, whether it's to the North Texas Food Bank of your choice, whatever it might be. We're just be grateful for that. And thank you so much. And I would say, Mike, I speak for all of us. We're grateful for you and the lessons that you're teaching us. So
yes, Natalie, Jean, and Jeff, thank you for allowing me to be on, and thank you for letting me share my story. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Well, I think we more than enjoyed it. That's almost sounds too trivial under the circumstances. We appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. New Zoom link. Please register and get your Zoom link for next week's program, and let us know of any donation you might make. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.